our biggest challenge at the National Archives, and I've talked a lot about this, is our digital transformation. And there's two components of that. The first is, of course, the fact that we have 13.5 billion paper analog records, and we've digitized about 350 million of those that are available online now. Makes us by far the largest online government archive in the world, by far, that 350 million. But we've all obviously got a lot more to do of the 13.5 billion. So the digitization is one component of that. But that's really dwarfed by the fact that in the next 10 years, we are going to be taking in, as part of our collection, trillions, not billions, but trillions of born digital records from federal agencies and also from presidential records we're already taking in that are born digital, but mainly from federal agencies. We'll be taking in those born digital records that will number the emails, the chats, the digital photographs, the digital film. It will number in the trillions. And we need to build the system to be able to manage those born digital records. First, to be able to intake those records from federal agencies in an efficient and effective way, then be able to manage those records so that archivists can work with those records and make them available. And then also the interface or the application that will allow you as researchers or citizens to be able to search those records and find the records that are responsive to what you're interested in or what you're looking for. And that is a huge job. We have components of that system. We call it a system of systems. We have a component of that, components of that are operational and work right now, but we do not have the whole system built. And we certainly don't have the whole system built for trillions of records. So we need to invest in that at the National Archives right now to start that process so that 10, 15 years from now, we are ready for that influx of born digital records, and we can work on making them accessible to the American public. But that needs to start now. And when I kind of found out that we hadn't, that it wasn't built, that we needed a lot of work to get from where we are to where we need to be, that challenge quickly went to the very top of my list. It's absolutely what we have to do. And on top of that, we have to, as you might imagine, this is not going to be like, super cheap to do. This isn't something, that you can do for, $1,000 or something like that. It's going to require a lot of resources to be able to do. And so to also be able to secure the resources that we need for that digital transformation.
So I'm going to turn it over to the audience for questions in just a minute, but I wonder if you would perhaps open a conversation that we had earlier today at lunch around the role of AI in this digital transformation. And then from that, we'll have all of you join into this conversation.
I know a lot of people are very skeptical and concerned about AI and artificial intelligence, and for very good reasons. But we, in our digital future at the National Archives, there cannot be a digital future of the National Archives where we make those records accessible to American citizens that is not going to involve artificial intelligence. Because when we're talking about, we've already got billions of records and we're continuing to digitize those at a faster rate. But then when you put on top of that the trillions of born digital records that will be coming our way, there is no way for any army of archivists or human, brains to be able to grapple with that scope of information. We are going to need to use technology in order to make sense of those records and to be able to develop effective searching of those records and interaction with those records. And we've already really started to do it at the National Archives. And I'll give you a couple examples. First, if you want to go online right now, if you want to go back, to your computer, or you could use your phone, if you go on archives.gov and you navigate to our 1950 census documents, which you can find, that was really the archive's first true experiment with artificial intelligence. Because as you can imagine, the 1950 census, these come up every 10 years. The 1950 census is all handwritten because census takers went door to door in before the 1950s to execute the census. And we have been able to use artificial intelligence to read the handwriting from the 1950 census to be able to index that census. So if you are searching for someone in the 1950 census and you know some information about them, for example, where they might have been living, their state, if you know the town, that's even better, obviously the name, you will be able to find a relative or an ancestor in the 1950 census. I was able to find both of my parents in the 1950 census. My dad, a little bit easier. His name is Richard Shogan. My mom, her name was Patricia Joy Smith. So a very common name, Patricia Smith. And I was able to find her in the 1950 census, and that was made possible through artificial intelligence. So a very good use of the tool in that example. Another way we've used artificial intelligence just in experimental phase, really in a pilot phase, when I came on board to the National Archives, my biggest problem, my biggest discrete problem, like I said, the problem that needed to be solved was that during the pandemic, the National Archives accrued a 600,000 request backlog for veterans records. 600,000 requests because people weren't in person at work at the National Personnel Records Center in St. Louis, where we keep all the veterans' records, and the veterans' records requests continued to come in. And they did process the most urgent requests for things like burials and other matters, but the vast majority of the requests went unanswered during the pandemic. When I came on board, I think the backlog was around, they had already started to chip away, but it was around 400,000 requests. And I'm telling you, people were upset. They were angry, they were upset. They had been waiting a long time for these requests. Members of Congress were breathing down our necks on this. You imagine they got complaints about it. So it was my first trip as archivist. As soon as they could book me legally on a flight, I was on after I was confirmed, I was, about 10 days later, I was on a plane to St. Louis to the National Personnel Records Center where all of our veterans' records are to talk to the staff, figure out where we were, give them kind of a pep talk, and review the plan to reduce this backlog. And I kept on that backlog, you know, every week I had a report. And when that backlog didn't go down the way that it was supposed to, because I was tracking it and I was looking at the numbers, I was on the phone to St. Louis. What's going on? What's the problem? Sometimes there was IT problems, there were other questions and issues, and we would sort out those problems and I would get them fixed because I wanted to keep progressing on that drawdown of that backlog of requests for our nation's veterans who needed access to their military service record. So during that time, we did institute a pilot project using AI, which was very effective. Most veterans' records have not been digitized yet, although we are working with the Department of Veterans Affairs, with the VA, to digitize those veterans' records, going backwards from the most recent records backwards. The records that have been digitized, we developed an AI tool, really pretty simple, to be able to pay. If you ever look at a veteran's records, that could be, hundreds and hundreds of pages, depending on your length of service or the complexity of that record. But most veterans service records requests can be answered, most, not all, can be answered by access to a DD-214, right? Which is just a summary, a one-page summary of your military service record. So we were able to train an AI bot to flip through a 200-page PDF and pull out the DD-214 in that veteran service record, pull out that page and email it to the requester. If that's all they needed was we'd call a simple veteran service request, which once again is the vast majority of the requests, able to read that file and email it. That then gives our archivists that are working on the more complex requests, they can then go to directly to those complex requests and answer and spend more time with those requests and get through them easier and faster than spending time doing the simple DD-214 requests. So that was an important innovation, and we're trying to figure out how we can take what we learned in that pilot project and then hopefully, institute that permanently and see how we can speed up access to those requests that we have. And we did get rid of the backlog. We got rid of it of January of this year, and that we had a big celebration in St. Louis when we did it.